Welcome to the Cookbook, where we invite guests on to share the ingredients of what has helped make them the successes that they are. All of it, the good, the not so good. You're not going to find anything half-baked here. And our kitchen gets messy sometimes. That's when the fun starts. So come on and join us. And welcome to another episode of The Cookbook. I'm your host, Iris Goldfeder, and I'm very excited about our guest today, Casey Jourdan. We met on a networking call with Deanna Seymour, and as we all know, Annie Ruggles, who we know and love, was on the call, and we got put in these little breakout rooms, and that's where Casey and I met, and she's pretty awesome. And so I'm going to read her bio and bring her on. Casey Jourdan is a coach and content creator who is passionate about supporting late embracing neurodivergent folks. That's important and it's interesting. She has a master's in rehabilitation and mental health counseling and personal experience with ADHD, PTSD, and traumatic brain injury, which you guys have heard me reference as TBI. I didn't know that. Casey helps people create and celebrate who they are without the weight of society's expectations. She walks with her clients to help them heal their past, reframe their present, and find their new path forward. So without further ado, let's meet Casey. Hey.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I didn't realize that you also had a TBI.
Yeah.
Wow. We're going to be talking about all the things today.
Absolutely.
So I, it was funny because I remember when we were on the networking call, every time you get put into a breakout room, right? It's always like a little weird. It's like, how do you get started? But the room that we were in, we had no problem. Like everybody in that room had no problem, like connecting and talking, clearly because you're here. Yep. So why don't you tell the audience about you?
Oh, gosh. The bio kind of covered the big current stuff. I'm a disabled Iraq war veteran. That's where the brain injury comes from and the PTSD. I married 2 dogs, no kids after a big infertility journey. That's kind of a big part of my story that I talk about quite a bit was we did a lot of IVF with 0 success. And so moved on to a child-free life. And that was a big pivot point in my life. And let me really lean into running my own businesses, doing my own thing. My husband supports me as long as it doesn't bankrupt him and it's not illegal. So I get to follow my nose. And now I'm in this, I ironically kind of landed in this world of working with neurodivergent people, which is perfect because I am very neurodivergent. And so it's fun to hang out with my own people and also get to help them because I've been doing it for so long. So like getting to see people are just realizing this stuff and like help them through it is such an honor and a treat for me.
Wow. And it's so funny because I know so many neurodivergent, people and, some of them have known forever. Some of them haven't. I have some form of ADD or ADHD. I was diagnosed and I remember that my doctor gave me this medicine. It wasn't Adderall. It was it Adderall? I don't remember. Whatever it was, I took it and I had a lunch meeting with a friend of mine. And I remember driving and I was driving going, like, what is happening here? Uh-huh. And like my thinking started getting slower. Mm-hmm. And then we had I met my friend for lunch and I was speaking very slowly. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I'm never taking this again." And she said, "What?" And I said, I was diagnosed with ADHD and my doctor put me on, Adderall. And she's like, "I've never seen you this calm." She's like, "It's almost unnerving." And I was like, I don't like, it was like I couldn't control like the speed of like anything. Right. And I was like, so I threw it away. We have a place like right down the road that has a depository for all of your like used drugs. Nice. And I like drove in and just like threw the bottle. I was like, done. Yep. But what was interesting about it was I started mindfulness and this was in 2020. And that really helped slow me down and get control of my thoughts more without the medication. But then my friend Scott and Kofi, who's, our producer, can tell you this was like the funniest episode. So Scott is ADHD. I'm ADHD. And the two of us are on this podcast, and he's a gay man, and he talks like very, 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 very fast. And he goes like this, and then and he can go here, and he can go here, and then and then we get on this thing, and Kofi's like, "Oh my God, reel this in," like reel it in, and it's like, "Oh, sorry, that's right, we're talking about this." But it's so funny when you're around, like people, how it kind of. How it just kind of, all gels. Yeah. So clearly you're a veteran. Yep. Oh, that's okay as long as go back to sleep. It's okay. Okay, we're good. Piper is just like, what's that? I had a meeting with somebody last week, and her dog started. Oh, no. And then these guys started, and there was just no stopping. We had to end the call, and actually it was Jennifer Urezio. We had to stop and restart. It was like, what the hell? It was pretty funny. So what arm of the, or what branch did you serve?
I was Montana Army National Guard, military police.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very, very different life.
Wow. Okay. So... Are you okay talking about the things?
100%, or yes, any open book, ask away.
Okay, I don't want to,
no, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. So, because when I think of military police, it's like you arrest somebody and you throw them in jail. So the PTSD, how did that come about?
So my original training in the military was to be a street cop, basically what local law enforcement does. That's what I was trained how to do. But then the Iraq war kicked off, Iraq and Afghanistan. I enlisted when I was 17 years old, 3 months before 9/11 for frame of reference. So I enlisted into a peacetime army that had never sent women into direct combat. And 3 months after I enlisted, it was the beginning of my senior year of high school, the 9/11 attacks, and everything shifted. And because I was still in high school, couldn't deploy right away. So I finished high school right after graduation, shipped out, did my military schools, and being National Guard, then I came back to Montana and I started college. And it was that was my plan. I joined the military to pay for college, build my resume.
A lot of people do, right? So
and so I was just kind of chugging along, and they decided, because of the politics of the Iraq war, they essentially wanted the military police to run the war, because we have the same training as the infantry, but we also have social skills. That's not the right word, but we have more more training in negotiating and communications and stuff like that. And so we got deployed into Iraq, and I actually turned 19 in Kuwait, waiting to go into Iraq. We went into Iraq a few days after my 19th birthday. We spent a year in Baghdad. And while we were in Baghdad, my primary job was a turret gunner. So the person standing outside the top of the truck with the big guns, that was my job, is eyes and ears security for whatever convoy I'm traveling in. And specifically, I worked on my commander's security detail. So I was with my commander, I was with officers all the time, making sure they got around Baghdad safely. As a whole, my unit was rebuilding the battalion I was with was helping rebuild the Baghdad Police Department. So we were going to police stations, meeting with officers, seeing what they needed, getting them paid, just rebuilding their whole system. And so I was credited with over 300 convoys without major incident. We were on the road basically every day of that year, and one of those convoys didn't go so well. On April 13th, 2004, we were hit with a roadside bomb, and I got slammed around in the truck. I have what's considered concussive injuries. There was no shrapnel, there was no bleeding, but I separated my shoulder and damaged the nerves in my shoulder, elbow, and wrist. And then we found out And I can tell this story, but basically it took 3 years to get my brain injury diagnosis because I didn't lose consciousness. But when we look back on it, I must have rattled my head off of something. And new research is showing that like even just the pressure wave from blasts that big can like bounce your brain in your skull and do damage. And so then that was the brain injury. And then the PTSD, I mean, obviously getting blown up contributed to that. And there was a whole bunch of, I mean, our company, had one of the highest like per capita Purple Heart rates at that point in the country. We were on one hand really lucky, on the other hand really unlucky, depending on how you looked at it. And so there was multiple situations that played into the PTSD, but yeah, a year in combat and a roadside bombing was kind of the short version of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank God you're okay.
Yeah. And
truly thank you for your service. I mean, I know people say this all the time and, you know, it's hollow, but I mean that from the bottom, you know, of my heart. Because that was a crazy time. That was like I think the craziest thing for me out of 9/11 was how we all became one the day after. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter. Yeah. None of it mattered. Yep. And here we are now. You know, it kind of blows my mind a little. But but I'm not going to do that because yesterday, oh my God, yesterday's podcast was so political. So I'm not going to go there. We went down a rabbit hole, boy. The name of my guest, their business was called Woke American Apparel.
That says a lot,
right? So
you kind of can't not.
I mean, he was a veteran, and they basically wanted to take our colors back, right? Because the red, white, and blue doesn't belong to everybody anymore, and so he wanted him to. But anyway, so it's just so funny that 2 days in a row there's we have veterans and not realizing it. How did you decide to become an entrepreneur? Like, how did all of that come about? Because that's a hell of a, wow. That's
there's a little bit of I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My mom and dad both own their own businesses at points. My brother paid his way through college, running his own little handyman business. Everybody so there was already this predisposition, this draw in the back of my brain. And when I first joined the military, my goal was law enforcement. And with my injuries, with growing up and getting into politics and understanding what was going on, I no longer wanted to stay in that field or career military. And so I got out of the military and kind of aimlessly wandered for a few years. Wow. Realized I wanted to help other veterans. So I got my master's in rehabilitation and mental health counseling and spent some time working as a counselor with other veterans, worked as a crisis counselor in one of the high schools in my town, and worked with NAMI, with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, as one of their peer support specialists and program coordinators. And all of that was amazing and also taught me that I still was dealing with my own shit. I was not stable enough in myself to be providing those kinds of services for others, especially working with other veterans, even my Vietnam veterans. Very different war, but as they told their stories, it was still really triggering to my own story. And so I decided not to stay in the counseling. And right around this time, my husband and I got married. Literally, first night of our honeymoon, we're sitting at a bar called the Mangy Moose in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And he's like, okay, we're married now. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? And I said, I want to quit my job and start my own business. and I don't think I'd ever talked about wanting to be self-employed in front of him, let alone. And I was and I meant in the next year or two, we'd just gotten married, let's let things level out. And he was like, okay, let's figure it out. And I was I'm really burnt out. My job is really triggering. I'm struggling to stay alive right now, essentially. And he's like, cool, let's figure it out. We ran through the money. We ran through what do I do if and when I leave my job. And I put in notice when we got back from the honeymoon, and went out on my own. And I started out in strength and nutrition coaching. I was a CrossFit addict for many, many years. And so worked in the CrossFit realm and did private training and coaching. And then that has morphed into kind of several other variations of coaching. But there was always this pull back to kind of the mental health stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of, there was a a moment a couple years ago. I was like, what am I waiting for? Like, why am I not doing the work I'm called to do? And so I made another pivot in my business, and I'm now doing more aligned with the work that I want to be doing.
Wow. That's amazing. And I mean, and good for you for being healthy enough to recognize that, because there are so many people that stay, right? Like they don't realize it until it's too late, until they've gone down that rabbit hole and they're just like, oh my God, I'm like, so.
And it felt shitty because like I had a master's degree, like I'd done all of this education and worked so hard to get into this field and then to walk away from it. And like that in and of itself, like was such a hard decision, but it was, I know too many people who stay in the wrong job because they have the degree and it's that like sunk cost. And like, I couldn't stay on that path. Like it was slowly killing me.
Wow. And yeah, I remember I was just talking about this in my show, Unique Voices. This is all going to like cross paths at some point, right? I started working for myself because I had so many bad bosses that it was just like, and I stayed because I needed the money.
Yeah.
And then it was so weird, like the way everything happened. My wife got a promotion, and I was working. Did she get? Because I was 10. I'm just trying to think of the timeline. I think it was like a year. She got promoted. I got the job. I was at the job for like 6 months. Got fired because I wouldn't conform. Saw the writing on the wall, and then it was like, man, I don't want to collect unemployment, right? So I started my own, thing. Yeah. And 10 years later, here we are, successful. But and I always joke, overnight success, takes 10 years, and and even still, right? It's still, I'm way ahead of where I thought I would be, but I'm not where I want to be yet, right? So I think another year I'll be there. But I think that, it's so cool because to have that support of a spouse, a lot of people don't.
Yeah, I can't say enough good things about this man. I absolutely married up. I'm not sure how I landed him. Like our third date, I had a panic attack that lasted 4 hours, and he asked me on another date after that. And I was like, well, he's a keeper. Like if that didn't scare him off, nothing will. And he is just endlessly supportive of my ideas, of my mental health, of my physical health. And I'm incredibly lucky to have him on this. Prior. I love you. Thank you. So, and it's hard, right? Like Heather is my wife, and, she has stuck with me. So I had another business before this. And that was because one of the companies I was working for screwed over all their clients. And it was like this long story. And they were like, we need your help. And I'm like, I can't help you for like 8 months. And then after the 8 months was over, like everybody came to me. So I was like, well, shit, I think I need an LLC to be able to do this. So I did that. And then after a couple of years, that started withering away because it was basically just building websites. Once you build a website, back then, nobody was talking about SEO. Nobody was talking about websites that converted, right? They were just talking about, I need an online storefront, right? I need a brochure site. Now it's like so different. Which I just did a video on that about, websites that convert. I have a prospective client who, her brother-in-law wants to do her website. I said, that's great, but is he going to build a site that converts? Yeah. And she's like, no. But because she's a friend and she's starting out on something, I'm like, I will let him build it. And then we'll do the SEO and all the stuff and throw in all the lead magnets and, whatever, if that's what you want. So I'm waiting to hear back from her. But I was just like, oh, anytime I hear a family member is going to do a website, it's like, are they a marketer? Right. No, don't let them do the site because it's not going to be built to work for you. They're just going to build you a website. And
much more than that now.
Yeah, it's not that simple anymore. Yeah.
No, it's, and it's just so funny to me when I hear that. It's like, oh, your brother. Okay. So a lot of people that are listening to this are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, right? Like they've, either they're in a job right now and they hate it, or they've been thinking about it for a while. What advice do you have for someone who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur?
Do it. One thing the short answer is do it. I learn the most through action. I'm constantly working with my clients. You can think about something forever. You can research it forever, but until you start putting pen to paper, until you start taking action, you don't know what works. You don't know what feels good. And so even if you have to keep the job or find a part-time job bagging groceries, start taking action, see what feels good, see what works, and pay your bills some other way and transition when you can. But you can think starting a business till the day you die. And I mean, that's a part of how I landed up in this, the work I'm doing now is, I think it was last year, I wanted to figure out TikTok. And I just said for the next however long, 3 to 6 months, I'm not worried about business at all. I'm lucky I don't really have to worry about income. And so I said, I'm just going to get on TikTok, fuck around and find out. And I'm just going to make the content that is fun. I was doing 3 to 6 videos a day. Don't necessarily recommend that. It was intense. But all I did was make TikToks and see what kind of response they got. And my niche morphed, and how I talked to the niche morphed, and what I learned from them. And then I fell into this late diagnosed neurodivergent crowd. I found them, but it was all through action. Right. I had a different thing in my brain that I was testing when I started, and I fell into the right place by clarity through action and repetition, and see what happens.
Well, you ended up where you're supposed to, right? I mean, That's just, and I love when serendipity happens. It's just one of those things that it just puts you in the right place at the right time for the right reason, and then the right thing happens. It's a beautiful thing. And I tell people, do it. I think I also, make sure that you know your audience.
Yeah.
Right. And make sure that there's a need. And I think that, for me, marketing, we're all in one, I can't even say what I am anymore today, all in marketing solutions for service-based businesses. And we are, we're the company that you work with when you don't want 20 different people doing your marketing. Mm-hmm. So it's Jen calls it one-stop shopping. And I'm like, I don't like the way that sounds, but it's a truth. You come here and you get everything done. For me, the market was the person who doesn't want to deal. I can't tell you how many people were like, so-and-so is doing my social media. So-and-so is doing my SEO. This person is doing my website. First off, if you're doing a website, you should be doing SEO. Yeah. Now, there are web builders that don't know SEO, right?
Yeah.
So we happen to know all of that. But, and then it's and I need business cards, and I need a banner for our trade show, and then I need a trade show set up. And it's we do all that. Yeah. And then one of my biggest clients needed all of that, minus the website and SEO, because they're a bank and I am not getting that's too much liability as far as the website goes. That's way too much information, for me to be responsible for. Yeah. But all the other things they needed, and it was oh, duh, this is our niche. So everyone's you need to niche down, and it's but I did. Yeah. No, you have to niche down further. No, I don't. Right. I'm kind of wearing, So it's comfortable and it's nice. And like I said, 10 years later, we're very successful, and we're very well known and well trusted. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is trust, building, building really good relationships with your clients. So the people that you work with, are you? So they're you're coaching the neurodivergent, are you coaching them on how to cope with being neurodivergent, or go me? Okay, so why don't you?
So it's kind of a two-sided job. A lot of my clients are in their 30s, 40s. I've got a handful of clients even in their 50s who are just finding out they have ADHD or autism. And sometimes, and usually there's a comorbid, like they also have complex PTSD or like other, like I technically have like a depression and anxiety diagnosis. I think those are a function of like my brain injury and like not knowing I had ADHD for a long time. So like my clients come in kind of a messy little bundle of chaos. And like, when you find out in your 30s, 40s that you have ADHD and life's not supposed to be this hard, there's a lot of emotional stuff that comes up. There's a grief period of, fuck, like who could I have been if I'd known this my whole life? Or like looking at high school, like I thought I was a failure in high school. Turns out I just have a brain that's not built for the public school system. Like if I'd had different supports, would everything in my life have gone differently? So a lot of times we start with like this like grief processing, this acknowledging, a lot of mindset work of like reframing thoughts. There's a lot of like, I'm lazy, I'm too much, I'm too loud, I'm too busy, I'm not enough, and catching those thoughts and like, no, you're perfect. Your brain doesn't match our society. Let's make accommodations that work. So there's that whole category where we're doing this like mindset, like self-talk adjustment. And then there's a lot of like strategic tools and stuff, how to like, the running joke is like, have you tried a to-do list? Like, yes, I've tried a to-do list. They don't work for me. But like, I look at it like I have 18 different versions of how you could do a to-do list. And so like, I walk my clients through that to find that one that'll work for them. What's going to work for your brain, your lifestyle, your needs. So we look at to-do lists, we look at planners, we look at like, in ADHD, there's time blindness is really common. So like not having a perception of like what time it is in the day, what time you need to be somewhere. If you have to be somewhere at 5:30, ADHDers tend to forget that there's also 30 minutes of travel leading up to that. So in their brain, it's like, oh, I need to leave at 5:30 because the thing is at 5:30. No, you need to leave at 5. 5, right. And so we talk about strategies of like how to become aware of that and then like how to build that into your day planning. So there is a lot of
that's really
tools, strategies, tips, tricks, but it's all customized to like, what are your needs? Because like everybody's got a different combination of neurodivergent needs, strengths, weaknesses, and my goal is to help you find the tools that are most streamlined for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's so funny you say that because I used to, so, if I have an in-person meeting, I have to put drive time in front of it, right? Yep. And not for me, but because people just hop on my calendar.
Yeah.
So
same.
If I have something right at like that I have to be there at 5 o'clock, I know that I need to leave by 4:30. And all of a sudden it's like, fuck, somebody
booked at 5 o'clock.
So I'm like, no, they booked the 4:30.
Yeah.
So then it's like, oh my God. So, then I tell my assistant, can you please email so-and-so? And, now I don't even ask my assistant to do it. Like if I know I have an in-person meeting, I'm booking depending, like I'm meeting a friend on July 10th for a pizza in, an hour away. I have an hour drive time but it took me a while to be like, why does this keep happening? I didn't put the drive time in. So.
Like for me, like that's a great example. I realized that because like my clients can access my calendar and just drop their appointments in there. And I wasn't accounting for the drive time. So I put the drive time in my calendar and like Google has this cool thing where like it'll automatically calculate the drive time if you put the address in. So I was using that, but then I ran into the problem. I was always like 3 to 5 minutes late for everything because Google does not account for time to park. And so like I now manually put in like what I want my drive time to be. Cause like, yeah, it's a 25-minute drive, but I have to circle the block 18 times because I don't know how to parallel park. So like I have to give myself, if it's somewhere that doesn't have a parking lot, I have to give myself an extra 10 minutes to find street parking. Like,
okay, so your next goal is to buy a car that parallel parks for you. I mean, yes. Those are amazing.
That would be amazing.
A friend of mine had one in New York and I remember being in it and we're like on, I don't know, one of the main avenues and we pull up to a spot and she lets go of the wheel and I'm like, are you fucking crazy? And she's like, nope. And it just does it. And
awesome.
I was like, oh, that's my next car. So my next car is going to have that. Not that I need it in Indiana, but when I go to Chicago or, whatever.
Yeah.
But I love that. And it's funny because I've had to train myself to really, mindfulness helps slow my mind down. But when you have ADHD, and what makes you an amazing entrepreneur, and I really believe this, is that we see everything.
Yes.
And people don't realize it, but we see everything because they're like, how do you know that? I don't know. I just know.
That's how I see it.
That's how it is. Yeah. And I think that gives us the wherewithal to be able to be an entrepreneur because we do see all the things. I think the only thing we have to do is just like organize all the things that we see and put them in like these little compartments. I've gotten so much better at that. Thank you, God. Thank you, universe. Because, I would see all the things and then want to do all the things. And then it was like, I can't do all the things. And then I have to get somebody to do the other thing. And then, so basically what I do is I work with all contractors. I don't have any employees. And I play Tetris.
Yeah.
Right. So a project comes along and it's like, oh, you need a website. That's this person. You need SEO. Great. Because I'm not doing a website without SEO. Like I will not do it because it's not going to be effective then. And then you're going to be like, your website sucks. It's like, no, it doesn't. But anyway, so there we go. So it's like website, SEO. Oh, you need a logo. Okay. So that's going to be this person. And you need a branding kit. Okay. So we're going to use that person. Then, we're going to use that person here too. But then we're going to put this here. And it becomes like this. Puzzle, and I love puzzles, so it's so much fun, right? It's just like because it keeps my brain going. And I remember this was like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago. I was sitting with a prospective client who was watching me work for another client and put all like, how the fuck are you doing that? And I'm like, it's easy. Because I'm like writing everything down while we're sitting because I literally had to. So this was one of the cases where, I didn't book the time, the drive time or whatever. And it just happened to be that I was meeting this person at the same restaurant. So I didn't have my time in between meetings. So I was like, I have to do this. So if you don't mind sitting here while I'm doing this, and he hired me like right there. He was like, oh my God, yes, you're my person. Yeah. I was like,
yeah. And like, that's like, on one hand, like that's a lot of what I do is partly from my own experience, partly from working with lots of people. Like I have this giant toolkit. Plus, like my ADHD, I can see things from so many angles. And so a client comes to me and they're like, I have all these problems. I'm like, great, what have you tried? They're like, I've tried all these things and they didn't work. I'm like, great, here's 100 more things to try. And they're like, oh shit, I didn't know there was more options. And like, I'm a big fan of like, I'm a puzzle solver too. And so like, I've actually recently started also doing like support for ADHD business owners in how do we see the big picture and how do we prioritize it and like helping them. Cause I'm like not emotionally attached. It's not my baby. Right. It's not my business. So it's easier for me to like pull things apart and put them back together in different order. And so like a lot of what I do is that same like, okay, this part of your life's working. This part's not. Let's mesh this. I like that, and like, yeah, that's my favorite. And clients are like, oh, I never would have thought of that. And I'm like, let's keep going. So I got more.
Awesome. So, okay. So people that are listening to this are also seasoned entrepreneurs, right? So what is something that either an obstacle that you've overcome or that you're still going through, like still working through, that they might be in the midst of themselves?
I think one of the ones I run into that I hear other seasoned entrepreneurs talk about is getting caught up in the idea that there's ever a finish line. Once I make 6 figures, once I make 7 figures, once I land that client, once I finish this project, once I get the website rebuilt, like there's always this like, oh, once I finish this thing, it's going to be easier, or I'm going to like be done, or I'm going to be famous. Like and I think it's really easy to like, none of that happens. Like in entrepreneurship, there's always the next level of hard. Oh, God. But like society teaches us goal setting. And when you finish a goal, there should be this like sense of satisfaction. But I find a lot of times I do this personally. I see it in other entrepreneurs, like we finish the goal and then there's almost this moment of panic instead of celebration. Cause it's like, oh shit, like, what do I do next?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
like, what's the next step? What's the, like, I thought this was going to be the big relief. And now I have to hire a team to maintain this, like, this presence that I've created. Like, that's the one. I work with a lot of like solopreneurs, like people that are just still in those early stages. And like, I see people that get in that and they like finally hit this threshold and they have to hire a team. And it's this like, so for me, the big one is like that, like, enjoying the journey for journey's sake and remembering that there's always the next level of hard. Even when you are goal setting and like hitting end points, there's never really an end point, which is the best and worst thing about
until you're ready
entrepreneurship,
for your exit plan, right? Because and it's true. I mean, so last year I was starting to scale, but I really didn't know what scaling meant. So I wasn't really scaling, I was growing. I haven't scaled yet, which was funny because I was like, oh my God, I'm scaling. It's like, no, you're growing. There's a difference, So I was like, oh, yeah, okay. Now I'm working on scaling. So now I'm in the throes of getting all the SOPs in place and all the things. And literally, like, I want them for a 5-year-old. I want it step by step so that there's like absolutely no, we could just go, here you go. This is how you do it. I mean, I'm not going to just hand somebody and, like trial by fire, because that's happened to me so many times and it sucks. But at least they'll have all of the steps that they need to take. Right. So, they can, for me, it's like, you need to be a self-starter. So start. If you have a problem, I'm here. Right. But do the thing. So I'm almost there. I'm not there yet. Yeah. Oops. Sorry. But I'm getting there. So that's kind of like where we're at for this year. But it's just so funny because, it's like I was working with one CRM and I thought that was it. I was like, woohoo, that's going to be it. And then it was like, nope, got to get rid of that. And now I'm, using Monday, and you can feel free to be our sponsor. But we're using, Monday.com because it's amazing as far as like projects and, everybody can put, their stuff in. So it just makes it so much nicer. And I know that in a year from now, I'm going to need something else. Right. So, but I like the way that you say, that you're not done, like you're never done. Mwahaha, you're never done. Yeah. So, I mean, and I think that's, excuse me, I think that's a good thing, right? Because when you stop, you stop.
Yeah. And to me, that's what makes entrepreneurship fun. And like, the rate of ADHD, I don't remember what the actual number is, but the number of people with ADHD that become entrepreneurs is like astronomical compared to like general population, any other career. But I think it's that thing of like constantly needing new challenges, constantly seeking dopamine, constantly needing change. And so like entrepreneurship always has that. Even if I keep doing the same type of coaching I'm doing now, there's memberships, there's courses, there's big groups, there's little groups, there's so many ways to change it within that, just the coaching bucket. And then there's learning new software. There's adding a team member and like learning that process. There's always this next thing to learn and play with and tinker with. And I'm endlessly researching something for some reason, like there's always a rabbit hole to go down. And I think that is really satisfying for
I mean, that's what we live for are those rabbit holes. And I see you have one of these. Yeah. I'm going to send you, I have this thing. I don't have it here. Where the hell did that go? It's a poppet ball. So it's a ball. Oh, yeah. And it's like, it has bubble wrap on it, but you can never pop them all. It is like, so when I love that. I'll get your address. It is like the best thing ever. And I go through them so much because I'll play with them and then all of a sudden I pop them, and you're not supposed to pop them, but I'll be like, you're all going to close at the same time. I love that. And we always have to be busy, right? So we always have to, and I stopped using it because actually Kofi, we were filming one of the episodes and he's like, what is that noise? I'm so sorry. It's me. I'll put it, I'll put it there.
And that's why I specifically have this one. And as I have tested it, is it's completely silent, even right next. Yeah, it's quiet, even right next to the microphone.
Kind of, right?
And it's small enough that
Can you hear that?
Yeah, I can't hear that at all. Yeah. And so I love it because I can have it in my hands and like
a little bit. Okay.
A little bit. Yeah.
Wow.
That one picks up a little bit. But like, it's also the kind of thing where like it disappears in my hands. So like a lot of times when I'm coaching or trying to be a responsible professional, like people don't realize I'm holding it. But for me, my hand, as soon as I drop my hand below the screen, it helps regulate my nervous system. It helps regulate my anxiety. It helps me keep from like fidgeting in the chair too much. And so it's one of the accommodations that I have for my ADHD is that I have a multitude of different ones, depending on whether or not I'm on a microphone. Some of them make a lot of noise. And so I just have a stack of fidgets at my desk, and it's part of how
amazing.
I function.
And I love that. I love that, and I'm holding this now. I love that, you know that, because it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard to know ourselves, right? Like, until we do that inner work. And that, for me, mindfulness was really, so when COVID happened, I went down a really deep rabbit hole of knowing for a fact that my wife or I were going to die in the hospital alone. Like, I was completely convinced, and I was freaking out, and I didn't know. I mean, I was like out of control to the point that I ended up giving myself a panic attack that I thought was a heart attack. So my wife had to take me to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And here's my worst fear coming true, right? So she like dropped me off in the vestibule, and I'm looking at her like, oh my God, I may never fucking see you again. So we kissed goodbye, and she just kind of looked at me, and I went in, and clearly they knew I wasn't having a heart attack because, but they're like, what's going on? I'm like, chest pain. So they throw me in like a wheelchair immediately. And they're taking me down this hallway, and, they said, is your mask on tight? And I said, yeah. She goes, we're taking you down the non-COVID, tier or whatever it's called. And I went, wing. And I went, oh, okay, good. Thank you. So, they're putting all the leads on me and everything. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm a mess. Like, I can cry thinking, like, I remember exactly how I felt. And I was like, oh my God, mm-hmm. like, I don't want to die without her. Like, what do you do? So after about, they take your blood, and they do the EKG, and they take an x-ray of your chest. And then, an hour later, he comes back and he goes, you can go home. And I said, you're not fucking with me, are you? He goes, why would I fuck with you? This is like the doctor, He's like, why would I fuck with you about that now? Like in this, time. And I was like,
right.
I don't know. So like, I'm not going to die. He goes, no, you can go home. You had a panic attack. I was like, son of a bitch. So I call her, and, so she picks me up, and I look at her in the car, and I was like, I just want to feel okay. Like, I'm tired of not feeling good. And she goes, I am more worried about your mental health than your physical health. And I was just like, oh, shit. Yeah. Okay. So we got home, and I started looking for a therapist. And then I realized I'm where I am in Indiana. I just, there's a lot of doctors that are like, we can change you and all that other shit. And I was like, I don't really want to tell somebody here my story. So I looked for my old therapist from like 20 years prior, and I found her. Or she, like I sent a message, and I was like, I don't know if this is the Angie that I saw, 20 something years ago, but if it is, and all of a sudden I get, an email back, hey, it's Angie, here's my cell, text me. And I was like, shut up. So I call her, and I started therapy like immediately. And I saw her 3 times a week. And then we realized after 2 months that my biggest issue was that I couldn't control what was going on. I couldn't control people to wear masks. I couldn't control people not to be stupid and irresponsible. And I couldn't control the leader of our country to tell people not to shoot bleach up their ass. There was like a lot of things that, and so, so realizing that, and then I started mindfulness, and then through all of it, I started doing really all of the inner healing, and I didn't realize there was so much that needed to be healed. And that was how I was able to overcome, or I'm not going to say overcome because I don't think I've overcome it, but how I've been able to deal with and manage, right, all of the different things.
Yeah.
So I love what you do. I think that that's amazing because people, like if I would have known there was a you 4 years ago, maybe I would have, reached out, to you or something. But
And a lot of folks who end up with me have done a lot of therapy and they've done a lot of healing work. But what ends up happening is like therapy is amazing, like not knocking it, but it can kind of only take you so far. Therapy is the past to the present. It's the like, why did this happen? How do I make peace that this happened? And coaching is like, a lot of clients are like, okay, I know what's wrong with me. What the fuck do I do about it? Yeah. And that's where coaching comes in, is I'm present to the future. What are the actionable things we can do? How do we take what you've learned about yourself and turn it on its head and make it a strength regardless of how it feels? How do we teach you the skills so that like, it's not, like you said, you're not, you haven't overcome it. It's not gone, but it's now managed. Like people ask, like with the brain injury, like, so like, when is this going to get better? And I'm like, never. Like it's permanent brain damage. But at this point, it's now been 20 years since I was wounded. Everything I need is so built into my life that it looks like my brain injury has no impact on my life because my life is built to my brain injury. And that's the goal, is like, whether it's anxiety, depression, ADHD, brain injury, is that we build a system for you that you aren't hitting hurdles every day and you can feel safe and secure and like not constantly getting like knocked off your rocker. Like that's amazing. That's where we're at.
God, I love that so much. So man, I have like a million questions right now. So for somebody who's listening right now who may have a TBI and they don't know, how is, and I know you can't diagnose something, so I don't want to ask you that because that's, and I don't want to be liable for that. So I'm not going to do that. But I mean, what are some of the symptoms? Like how does somebody, start realizing that maybe, because there are a few people that I know that have had TBIs that didn't know it until they knew it. And they completely forgot that when they were a kid, they smacked their head against the, whatever, the brick wall by accident, or they were playing, dodgeball and they got whacked in the head with, something, right? Because at the end of the day, our heads get rattled a lot and we don't realize that, there's, the brain is in there and the fluids are in there, but once it happens, it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And our understanding of like what concussions, like high schoolers that have concussions now, a lot of schools have policies where like, if there's a, football player, if they get diagnosed with a concussion, they're off the field for at least a month, if not the rest of the season. Like, but we didn't know that 20, 30 years ago. I have an uncle who was in a car accident, and this is like 50 years later, and we're realizing there are long-term ramifications of the car accident he was in and the ladder he fell off of decades ago. I think the big one for me is like, a lot of us are taught to not believe our inklings. Like in your gut, you feel like something's off. You feel like you don't fit in. You feel like your reactions are wrong. Like for me, part of what led us down the rabbit hole of a TBI was I had a couple symptoms that didn't quite line up with PTSD, and we were just kind of writing it off with the PTSD, but it never quite matched. And so we kind of kept our eyes open. It's like, if you have that link, if like that inkling that something feels harder than it should be, lean into that. Like, don't believe society when they say you're overthinking it. Like I have been accused of being a hypochondriac by my mother more than once in my life. And so far, everything that I was a hypochondriac about, I was also right. And there was something wrong or different about my brain or my body that could be fixed or addressed, improved. So like, trust your gut and start exploring. Some of the, like, I'm on TikTok a lot. The TikTok algorithm is obnoxiously good. There are a lot of people who are finding out they have ADHD and autism thanks to the TikTok algorithm. Go down the rabbit hole, do some research, find other lived experiences on social media, on Reddit, on like blogs, and just read and see if it fits. And then depending on where you're at in life and what you want to do with that information, take it to a doctor or not. The thing with like brain injuries is like there's no way you can't just get a CAT scan. Like my CAT scans come back clean, my MRIs come back clean, but my neurological testing shows that there's definitely damage. And so like getting diagnosed is really hard this day and age, and especially in the US medical system, which is its own, like, to get an autism diagnosis is like a 3 to 5 year wait for adults and costs $2,000 to $5,000. Most adults can't go through that process. They don't have access to that wait time or those financial resources. And so like, I'm an advocate for some level of self-diagnosis. If you relate to ADHD, autism, a traumatic brain injury, PTSD, if that makes sense to you and what you're reading about other lived experiences matches yours, and you can give yourself accommodations that make yourself life better, playing with a freaking fidget while you're on the phone, do it. You don't need a doctor to tell you that you have a brain injury to take care of your brain as if you have a brain injury. And so find what works for you and do it.
That's, And listen to your intuition, because a lot of times we just don't, And that's another thing I started working on was my intuition, because I used to, you get that feeling that, this may not be right, but you're like, I'm sure it's fine. No, as soon as you get that feeling, listen to it. It's telling you, it is telling you something. I've gotten much better at that now. And again, for me, it's like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Yes, I 100%. Yeah. And I think too, especially listening to your intuition for entrepreneurs.
Say that 3 times fast.
Because there's so, right? there's so much messaging around hustle culture. You need to work more. You need to be working 100 hours. Like, I have several friends who run multiple 6-figure businesses and work less than 20 hours a week because they have chronic illnesses. Like, is it easy started? Like, did it take them time to build a business with that model? Yes. Like, it's not an overnight success, but like, it's buildable. My business is built around how my brain works. So some days I work 10-hour days, and sometimes I don't work for 4 or 5 days. And that was a lot of internalized ableism and messaging about hustle culture of like, oh God, like, I'll never make it as an entrepreneur if I'm not working 100 hours a week.
Right.
Bullshit. If I work 100 hours a week, I will destroy my nervous system and I will have to quit my business. So I have to adapt. And so there is this like trusting my intuition when I need a break, trusting my intuition when I have the energy to lean in harder and go ahead and hustle for a while, and then learning how to build some systems to like balance that out in the long run.
Yeah. And it's funny because like today, so last week, the last few weeks have just been a lot, right? So, and I'm grateful for all of it. But today, I purposefully didn't book anything until a lunch meeting. And then the weather was really bad in Indy. So, she was like, hey, can we reschedule for next week? And I was like, yes. So I actually had,
please,
so when I went to bed last night, I knew that I didn't have anything until noon. And then I woke up this morning and I looked at my calendar and I'm like, why don't I have anything? Right. And I was like, I'm okay. Like, I can do it. And I was like, okay, clearly I needed the time last week. So, in seeing that, it was funny because I was like, ooh, now I have time to do a couple of other things. So I was able to put a proposal together and do like a couple of other things that I normally would do at like 9 o'clock at night. But I was able to do it today. And it was awesome. I was like, this is amazing. Plus I was able to, hop in the shower, make it over to the 90th celebration, come back, do the show at 2:30, do this podcast at 4 o'clock, and we'll be done. Well, actually in a few minutes. And And I had one of the easiest days that I've had in a while, and it feels really good, right? To be able to do that once in a while. But you're right. It used to be all hustle, 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 hustle. The calendar has to be completely full, because if it's not, then something's wrong, and then you're not making money, and blah, blah. And that's, you're right. It's ableism for you to be able to just, you need to just give yourself and your brain a break. I mean, that's really just kind of going, okay. So what's your differentiator? There are a lot of coaches out there that, work with adults with ADHD and what you do. So what makes you different than them?
I think my differentiator is, I think there's kind of three parts. Two parts. One, I have the mix of professional backing and like education, like the master's degree in mental health. And I have a decade of lived experience, 2 decades, 20 years with brain injury. So there's this, like, I remember my pre and post brain injury life and having to consciously learn to live with a neurodivergent brain. And so I think that's a really unique experience. A lot of people are just either not neurodivergent and working with neurodivergent population because it's kind of a catch, like it's popular right now, or they are neurodivergent and they're only living from only ever knowing that. Like, I went from having a near photographic memory to having trash memory. Like, I don't know what I ate for breakfast today. And so like so like that's a big one for me, is just the combination of skills that I bring. And then I think the other differentiator is, I think I'm just a lot of fun. I bring a lot of fuck around and find out to it. Fun. So I just try to make it like casual and like feel good for everybody.
I was going to say, you said you had a photographic memory, and the joke with my family was I had a photographic memory until I ran out of film. But for me, it wasn't a TBI. It was I partied my ass off in the 80s, and it is what it is. I'm great with numbers. Like, if I see a number, I'll remember the piece of paper that it's on. I'll remember, but now words, forget it. Not going to happen. There may be a name on that piece of paper. Yep. Nope. Or I'll write like the number down, and then I'm like, fuck, who is that? So,
what is that? Yeah. And like for me, like I can watch a movie. Like I used to be able to watch a movie once, and I could like recite half the damn thing back to you, like direct quotes. Now I can watch a movie 5 or 6 times before I can remember. Like I remember if I like it or not, but I can't remember like what's happening. So my joke is that I keep rewatching the Titanic, hoping it's going to end different. Keep getting surprised by the ending on that one.
Not going to change. Well, this has been amazing having you on. Like, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. How do people find you?
Absolutely. CaseyJourdan.com/hello. That's everything you need to know about me. And Jourdan is Jourdan. We have to spell it funny just to make it complicated, but there you'll find all my social media. You'll find my email address. You'll find my services. Everything
that is amazing.
Want to know about me.
And the last question that I ask all my guests is, what lights your fire?
What lights my fire? I feel like this should be an easy question to answer, but I was not prepared for this one. Leaving politics out of it, because that can fire me up. Joy.
Like, what excites you? What? Yeah.
Yes. Really anything that brings joy. And that, like, for me, that's everything from like playing with my dogs and watching them be goofy to like my husband tickling me to like going camping, things that create joy, because there's not enough joy and there's not enough play in our lives as adults. And so when we can have joy and we can have play, like, more of it.
Love it.
Please.
Casey Jourdan, thank you so much for joining us. Hang on one second. I am going to say goodbye to our audience. I'll be right back. Everybody, thank you so much for hanging out for an hour, a little bit over today. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope that you got some really cool nuggets out of, I think I froze, but I hope you got some really cool nuggets out of today. And you know what? Listen to your intuition. If there's something there that's telling you something's not exactly right, get it checked out, because something might not be exactly right. So thank you all so much. Please like, share, subscribe, and reviews. Those are our lifeblood. I'm going to say that every single show from now on because I didn't know. Now I know. So please go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and leave a review for the cookbook. And appreciate all of you. And until the next time, go out and find what lights your fire. See ya.